everybody. When we were together last, we put this motherboard into the case. We covered just the 9 screw locations and this back plate for all the various connections to keep things nice and neat. This is your preference, of course, but for me, I like to put the cabling together at this stage. You can neaten it up and things after, but I find it easiest to work in here when there's nothing on the motherboard. So you could put the processor in now if you wanted, you could put the RAM in now if you wanted, and other cards and things. Before we bother doing any of that, I want the most room to get my hands in here and connect up things. So, couple of tips before we get started. You will see locations here have labels. So that says system fan. This is for power. You'll see ATX power. Different jumpers, USB, all around here, right? And they're labeled what they are and what they do. And we're gonna need several of these depending on what you're connecting. A couple of really important ones over here. There's power, CPU power, and over here, very, very specifically, and not to be confused, even though there is a connection here for power, and it's near where the CPU socket is, the pins for the CPU power are actually here, not in the location next to the socket. So you want to be very careful what you're connecting where. That matters because the motherboard is going to be controlling spinning up and spinning down the speeds of these fans to optimize performance and cooling and things. So you'll want to be really careful. Even though you could connect a fan there and it would work, it wouldn't work correctly because the instructions would be different from the motherboard to what the fan should be doing relative to the temperatures and things in here. So, so keep that in mind. Now, this is a bit of an eye test if you're trying to do this. But online, I went to the MSI website. I grabbed a few things. I grabbed the latest BIOS. What's a BIOS? Okay, we'll talk about that. The BIOS is the basic input-output system. It's really the controls for this motherboard. And the software that, or firmware, I guess, that's controlling this motherboard has updates, like any other piece of software or firmware. And so you'll want to grab the latest from the manufacturer's website, and we'll apply that after. You can't do it now until it's until you stop connecting up some things. But there's that. Then there's also just general updated drivers for supporting the various other pieces that come on here. So, like I said, this has built-in audio. There are audio drivers. This has built-in Wi-Fi. It has various other system drivers depending on your operating system. So if you're using Windows, there are a couple of different sets of drivers for Windows or Linux, whatever you're installing on here. So definitely take a visit to the manufacturer's website, grab all the latest drivers, grab the latest BIOS, and put all of that on a flash drive. Now, don't just download it and copy it, because typically it is compressed in a zip file. You're not going to be able to use that. You'll want to extract, open up those zip files, and move the contents to a flash drive so that you'll be ready to go when you get over here and start building your system. So, like I said, you could connect a bunch of other things on here. Before we bother with any of that, I'm gonna get the power supply in and get some of our wires. This is probably the most, I would think, time-consuming and sort of fiddly part of system installing, is just getting all the wiring hooked up. And then gonna try to do it neatly while I go, and that's that's probably the most time consuming part, is getting these wires all nice and neat. And not only does it look good, but it also helps with airflow. So you don't have jumbles of wires hanging in the wrong spot. You don't want any of your wires like hitting any of these fan blades. That one's kind of close. I'll try to get that out of there. That has happened. Eventually the fan can wear down through the wire, and then, you know, cut the wire and it'll stop working. So, or you'll have a bigger problem on your hands. So that's what's next for us. We're going to get our power supply in. Why? Because that's going to be connected to our various power areas. And then we'll pull some of the cabling through and get all our wiring at least seated and in correctly. Once the wiring is all connected up, everything else is actually pretty quick and easy. The RAM just plugs in, the storage just plugs in, and the CPU just drops in. And then the last piece is this big CPU heatsink and fan, which at that point then is going to make it very difficult to get our hands in here and do much of anything in all these small areas. So while we have maximum place to get our hands all the way in here, for example, the RAM would be in the way now if I was trying to touch any of these. I do have my static strap on, by the way. Let's get these connected up. Quick unboxing of this Thermaltake Toughpower power supply. It came with, of course, some documentation, power supply itself. I mean, this is nice. It's funny, it has almost a very similar painted quality, all the modular connections. The other cool thing that this came with that I thought was really nice is this bag here, which is really pretty slick. It's a nice touch. This bag with all of the various cables in it. By leaving a little bit of space here, it gives you some flexibility. These are some pretty tough wires actually to bend. It takes a decent amount of force to bend some of these thicker sets of wires. So we'll have to just kind of form those by hand to make sure everything fits. They also give us the OSHA power cable here. The power supply is going to have you probably can't see that, but there's a fan. In fan operation, this will be probably a helpful tip for you in a lot of ways. In fan operation, the side without the guard is always the intake. The side where the guards are is out. So the fan is always pushing air toward the guard. So air's coming this way, in this way, out this way. So that's going to help you when you're looking at your CPU or any fan for that matter. If you don't know what direction the airflow is going, you can think about your fan placement in a couple of ways, and it's going to depend on how you want to do this for your CPU, for your power supply. You could, in this case, I have a couple of options. I could place it with the fan here, which would pull air from the bottom of the case because it's vented. It would pull cool air from the bottom of the case into the power supply and out. Or if I flipped it the other way, it would pull air from the case, which is already warm, through the power supply and out. So I think I'm going to, and some people like that, right? Because if you have a graphics card here, those fans are going to be pointing this way. And so you might think, sure, I'm going to take the air from here, pull it in here, and pull it all through. But you're going to be pulling a lot of hot air, potentially, from your graphics card into the power supply and then out the back. And personally, I don't think that's optimal. I would take cooler air from underneath the case into the power supply. That's why this dust filter is here. Cooler air in and out. But you do have options there, depending on how you want to mount it. There's different schools of thought for that one. First things first, let's get some of this cabling out of the way. And let's be careful not to unseat any of this, because this is modular. And my motherboard needs a 24-pin ATX. So I'm going to need all of these and this set of pins here. And you'll see there's a wire for that, which will plug into both of those locations. And then the other end, of course, is this much wider 24-pin. That'll go right to the motherboard. I also grabbed 2 of these because I need these. These are CPU cables. And my motherboard needs 2 of these. So I have 2 of these. I'll plug those into these CPU locations. You're gonna need to pull all this stuff through that's back here that's hanging out. And all of these are probably the trickiest to get right. And that's why I like having my hand in there as much as possible. But, you know, everything's labeled: audio, USB, USB 3, and these other ones are for the fans. So now that we have all our power wires ready, let's just get them connected. And you can see there's a, you can't see actually, there's a little tab here, and that just clips right in here. A lot of people are a bit nervous about building computers, but I try to remind them, things mostly, for the most part, can only go one way in one spot. It's a little difficult to do it incorrectly for the most part, right? I mean, this only goes one direction. It's impossible for me to put that in backwards, and it's also impossible for me to plug that anywhere else. And I can see that that's not seated and clicked in all the way. This is why I like to do this out here, because if I was trying to do that inside the case, that wouldn't be fully seated, and it would forever have the potential to come loose. So I'm just gonna squeeze it in there until it clicks. Ooh, there we go. All right, and I know that's in good. Whoa, those are snug. Okay, that's main power, and the other end of that looks like this. That's main 24 pin power. Let's see if we can just hold some of this stuff out of the way. And yeah, there we go. Just fit that in there like that. Plenty of room. I'm gonna take this chassis out of here, which is gonna leave me more room for wires. And that, because I don't expect I'm ever gonna need hard drives of this size. In the back of this power supply, there's screw locations. You'll want to make sure those are lined up, and sometimes it's a little confusing as to what is and what isn't a place for a screw, but you'll see that the right one is going to have some threads, and some, like the wrong one, is just screwing into nothing. That's the right one over here. You can see because it's threaded. But once you start putting 1 or 2 screws in, you'll have the right ones. You can see that one's threaded there. So just make sure you're actually screwing into something that's meant to have a screw. What I'm going to do is feed some of this through the back, roughly to the locations where they belong, and that way we'll be able to lay this down again and work on it. That was a considerable amount of trial and error, which I spared you from. But let's take a look at what has transpired here. So what I did was identify which cable, for example, this is audio, and where the audio port is on the motherboard. For example, audio is here. And so I routed it to the closest location from the other side, right, through. And I did that everywhere. And it's gonna take some trial and error. These are the CPU leads up here. There's not a lot of slack, and you'll wanna be careful to align things where you can keep them nice and neat. You know, we have these areas where we can put some zip ties and things just to keep stuff flat and smooth. You don't want to have big jumble in here. If you end up with too much bulk, you won't be able to put the side on. You want to be careful. You don't want to overbend these things, but you can encourage them a bit. And power wires are okay to bend a little more than some of the other wires, but eventually you can get that just to behave itself. This wire you can replace, this you cannot without replacing your motherboard very easily. So you want to be extra gentle with this. If you have to be forceful with this. You can always get an aftermarket one of these if you need to. If you have a modular power supply, that's another plus. Also, another good thing about a modular power supply is if these are too short, you can get longer ones, and you can really make your cables nice and neat. I think what was supplied is going to be just long enough to make it to the location, look neat, and I should be able to neaten the other side of this. Get that one clicked in there. Okay. Now, that's that power cable. These CPU ones are going to be the same thing. They have a really, really tight bend up here against the edge of this. I've got a little bit of space here, and I'm not running a radiator, but man, if you had a radiator up here, you would have even less space to make these bends. So it would be pretty tight. All right, so I'm just going to keep going through here, connecting up these wires, and when we get to the trickiest of these, which is the all the top switches, well, we'll resume. But most of these only go one way, which is fortunate, so you don't have to worry about it. And then consult the motherboard documentation to know what's what if you're having a hard time reading these labels. Looking at this set of pins right here, this little block is going to map to this diagram here. This came with the motherboard, and all of these. So this is a little interesting to get your hand in here and do these. It's also hard to make them look neat because these are all going to have to sit in different directions. So do your best, take your time, but this is going to tell you which wire is positive and which wire is negative, and how this should be oriented on this pin block here. And there's just 2 pins, and it's the way the block is laid out, it's very easy to put them you know, either horizontally or vertically, and you'll want to make sure you're putting them on correctly. So I'm going to go through and put these on. Okay, there we are. Those all just sit on that power block in the way that they should. Everything is wired. That is hands down the most time-consuming part of this whole setup. Now, once we put everything on, test it out, the last thing I'll do is neaten all these wires up on the other side. For now, I'm going to try to make sure they're as neat as they can be in this area. This is going to get very hard to work on once we start adding components, especially the CPU heatsink. Then at that point, you can't really get your hands in here and stuff as easily. So that's motherboard wiring in a nutshell. Like I said, most of these are keyed. They only go one way. The challenge is more about routing them neatly for optimal airflow. And you can see these are still somewhat in front of this fan, but not a lot. And I don't want to try to bend anything any more than that. This is so stiff right here. It's actually immovable. What you want to do, most importantly, really, is making sure you're not putting too much tension on the motherboard connections such that they are gonna bend disconnect, break, or you're gonna have to buy a whole new motherboard, and they are not cheap. We'll start connecting components and then get this thing fired up.